All right. Anyway, we've got an email here that brought up something. He's on your side, Brian, without gratuitously putting you over in the email, but you were arguing with me about this last week, and many other people. Oh, I can't believe Cornette didn't even like this. The match between Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair. And I'll talk about it here in a minute, but I want to read this. Dear Jim, I'm a longtime fan of yours. I listen to both shows every week. I'm a patron. I've ordered from Cornette's Collectibles and on and on. I value your opinion in wrestling above all others. But the simple fact of the matter is you are wrong in your assessment of Banks versus Belair as the main event of night one of WrestleMania, and the answer to your criticisms went right under your nose. You said that perhaps Angle and Rousey versus Triple H and Stephanie could possibly be the only believable female-included main event. The answer is right there. Ronda Rousey herself main evented multiple major drawing UFC events, and nobody questioned it. Actually, Dana White did say for years that he was never going to have women's wrestling or women's fighting until he found a box office attraction. But anyway, why? Nobody questioned it because she was over. She was a star. Sasha Banks is over. Bianca Belair is over. They are over in WWE to a comparable degree that Rousey was over in UFC, the top women in the promotion. How much more closely can you draw the comparison? It's a combat sport league. It's not like the NBA versus the WNBA. UFC is a single organization that has both male and female competitors, and it makes no difference to them which gender gets more over. UFC 193, for example, featured Rousey versus Holm in the main event, and it set a huge attendance record for the company, drawing 56,214 fans for a gate of 6.8 million, with 1.1 million pay-per-view buys. So it is simply wrong of you to imply on any level that women should never main event WrestleMania. Women can draw just as much as men can, and the audience for combat sports, which pro wrestling claims to be, well, not anymore, but doesn't really care whether they're seeing men or women. They want to see star athletes who they can believe in and get behind competing, and that's what they saw in Banks versus Belair. I love being a member of the cult, Jim, but I can't help calling you out when I believe you're wrong, and here is one such occasion. I hope you listen to what I've said and consider modifying your view of this. And without giving you any credit whatsoever, you were saying the same thing. Well, Sasha and Bianca are as over as anybody in the company, so shouldn't they be on the main event? And I've got to be honest, although we can argue this both ways here, this email here in a second, I've got to be honest. I was just feeling especially nostalgic for any kind of actual professional wrestling that I could enjoy over that weekend. Even though it was the main event of night one, I was talking about it after I'd seen both of them in quick succession. I didn't knock the match because there wasn't anything wrong with the match. I'm just sitting there going, it's come, and I believe that was the quote I used, it's come to this, that the girls' match is the most over match. The main event of WrestleMania, traditionally in history, has been the hottest match, the biggest attraction, the absolute pinnacle of professional wrestling, the main event at WrestleMania, and it is now the most over girls or most over people in the company are girls, which to me is another symbol of how we've completely lost the fucking plot of what wrestling is or it was for 100 years. But I will argue one point, Brian, and this was from John, by the way, John in Nashville. Did Sasha Banks, Bianca Belair, or anybody else draw 56,214 fans? And I know it's a pandemic, but the gate of 6.8 million, 1.1 million pay-per-view buys. If they find a girl who can do that kind of business once they let people back in stadiums, if they ever do, etc., or that kind of pay-per-view business, well, they can't find that anymore because they don't do pay-per-view. But you see where I'm going with this. We have reached a point in wrestling where it's not that a woman comes along and breaks all the men's box office records, and she's such an attraction because of that. It's that There really are no box office records anymore. And the audience is smaller than ever before. And basically, we're down to the core audience that just wants to watch this performance, and they think the girls perform better than the guys. So, but I shouldn't have sloughed off Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks, because they obviously, I did say they were better than any of the guys in AEW, and but it's just, I was wrong in not giving them more time and attention, and it was a byproduct of me just realizing that wrestling is never coming back, and this is the state of it today. That imagine if for 100 years you watched pro basketball, the NBA. They've even been around 100 years, but wrestling has. And they decided in the last 10 or 15 years, we're going to keep the ball in the hoop, and we're going to change everything else about the game. More importantly than that, we're going to let everybody play, whether they can or not, and no matter how tall they are, because everybody wants to be included, and we're just going to perform some basketball and do some tricks. Would the basketball fans even though the trick fans may like it, the Harlem Globetrotters fans may actually no. The Globetrotter fans would not even gravitate to that, because the Globetrotters were highly trained, probably some of the best legitimate basketball players. That's how they could do all those tricks. What? It's just that every match that I watch, whether it's male or female, I'm reminded that nobody believes anything about this anymore. That not even the participants nor the promoters are taking this seriously. Even though some of the fans now today say, well, it does take me out of it when they have a big hot match, and then there's a picture on social media where they're at each other's backyard cookout or whatever the example. And I think Ron Wright and Whitey Caldwell lived in the same town, small town, Kingsport, Tennessee, for 20 years, coexisted in the same town. People thought they hated each other. They were good friends, but they never let on, and they took it seriously enough that they planned what houses they bought based on the school districts so that their kids never had to go to school together, and so the other kids wouldn't see they weren't fighting with each other. Or I see these goddamn ridiculous fucking comedy skits, and I long for the days when you could get a group of people in an arena to literally live and die with the fucking babyface, to the point where if all hope seemed lost, they would risk going to jail to physically assist him. And now the fucking fans are all patting each other on the back for giving star ratings approaching that of what Uncle Dave gave to the latest fucking gymnastics exhibition. I bemoan and I'm heartsick at the lack of any kind of emotion in this business anymore. You want to see, if you watched wrestling, you want to see fucking guys cutting entertaining promos, talking the way that they look like they ought to talk, that you can believe in, and when they want to rip some other motherfucker's throat out, you want to believe they want to. And then you go to a match and you want to see them try to do it. I don't want to see the fans fucking applauding because some goddamn idiot in a dinosaur outfit did a fucking triple fucking Lindy off the top rope onto 17 goofs waiting to catch him. I want to see the fucking heel throw a rope around the babyface's neck and fucking hang him over the top rope and have him so fucking gasping for breath that some fucking asshole that works at a goddamn Jiffy Lube in Shreveport comes over the rail and fucking pulls his goddamn knife out and cuts the motherfucker down. Which has happened, by the way, on a couple of instances. As a matter of fact, it was Tulsa. Nikolai Volkov and Terry Taylor. cut the rope to cut Taylor down and slice Nikolai Volkov's bootlaces in half with the same fucking swipe. I want to see the fucking fans buying an autographed picture of the babyface and putting it on their wall in their living room next to Jesus and their grandmother. I want mid-sized cities in this country to sell 200,000 or 300,000 wrestling tickets a year, and because of they watch their wrestling show on their goddamn real television station instead of cable, to where everybody in town knows who everybody is, to where fucking arenas are full and emotions are riding high, and goddamn people want to be involved in this fucking chaos. I don't want to sit back and watch a bunch of middle school children play sticky finger with each other. And that's what we're getting these days. And it's a sorry substitute, and so I get a little sour. And I will read you one more thing, Brian, and then you may reply to my fucking meanderings. Rock Rims. We've talked about, every time we talk about his books, I don't know why we do, because every time he does a printing, he sells out immediately. So it's not like he needs any promotion. We're probably giving him headaches. Every time we talk about his books, they're out of print. But in his introduction, and he reprinted it in both Legends and Icons about Southern California wrestling, and then the book about Northern California wrestling as well. But in his introduction, there's a very apt description of what we all used to be able to experience when we went to wrestling matches. Imagine you're sitting in a movie theater and watching an action movie that engrosses you so much that you begin shouting out loud at the screen, cursing at the villain, and hoping someone will turn the tables on him. And you're not the only one shouting at the villain. Virtually everyone in the theater is also. Now imagine that the villain actually turns towards you as you shout those insults and threats and begins shouting insults back at you, or merely sneers at you before he gives the fallen hero of the movie another kick in the ribs for good measure. Now that you've got your imagination warmed up, picture the villain again turning towards you and sliding his thumb across his own throat as if to say he's finished, and then spitting on the ground or giving you the finger. While he's doing that, you and everyone else in the theater is urging the hero to get up, pleading with him not to give up, to find that hidden reserve of willpower, strength, and energy so that he can overcome overwhelming odds and defeat the villain. Then you notice an almost imperceptible nod of the hero's head as if he's saying, yes, yes, I can do this. And somehow, some way, the hero rises from what seemed like certain defeat, and with a never-say-die determination, fueled by the collective encouragement and faith of the audience, he mounts a comeback against the villain, whose eyes grow wide with shock that the hero is even able to stand, much less retaliate. More and more, the hero gains ground in the battle, and the villain is backpedaling, reeling, and there's a very real look of concern on his face. The energy and the cheers of the theater audience grow both in volume and intensity, and they feel at one with the hero, as if their collective energy is making a huge difference in the outcome of the battle. They become so emotionally invested in his character that his defeat would have been their defeat, just as his impending victory would be theirs as well. That's a fucking live wrestling match before they fucked it all up. And we had 18 million fucking corporations and outsiders and people come in and take the thing over, and Vince went crazy and thought he was Walt Disney. And then all these fucking jacklegs and greenhorns that got into business grew up reading the internet and thinking that they knew everything about the wrestling business, when as far if it was fucking brain surgery, they wouldn't even be able to find the fucking part of the body the brain's located in, because it's a lot deeper than these nitwit performers will ever understand. And the whole thing's been fucked up to where now we're watching fucking Felix and Pac do fucking gymnastics routines with the Cucamonga kids on national television, and they're happy when they get 1 million fucking people. They're turning cartwheels. What do you think, Brian?
I mean, I agree with a lot of your points overall, but I don't see how any of that reflected what you saw with Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair. It was the best. No. I thought it was the best match at WrestleMania. I thought it told the best story in the ring. There was real emotion involved. which you'd kill for. You know, when Ric Flair cried at the end of Starrcade 83, you felt it. Bianca Belair cried at the end of WrestleMania. She won the belt. I thought it was great, and any of the other issues you have with modern wrestling, or from based on what you were saying, modern wrestling fans, I kind of think it wasn't really, it wasn't exemplified in this match. This match was great.
That's if you followed, that's what I'm saying. I apologized for giving them short shrift because of my general overall discomfort or disgust with just what they're doing for wrestling these days overall. And I took it out on them because it was the last match at WrestleMania, and I was like, fucking hell.
And it was the best match at WrestleMania, but the other thing is...
and that's another thing.
You have a problem, it seems, with them being women in the main event spot.
Because, goddamn, again, and I'm sorry if it's sexist, I don't want to see the lingerie football league. If I was a football fan, I want to see the NFL. I want to see Steve Austin and Bret Hart have a fucking I Quit match with juice and fucking passion and emotion and violence. I don't think anybody's, and I started to say, I don't think anybody's going to get worked up enough to hop the rail and hit the ring on a girls match, but nobody's going to get worked up enough to hop the rail and hit the ring on a goddamn guys match anymore either. So I was apologizing. Yeah, no, none of the things that I was talking about were epitomized in the Banks and Belair matchup, except this is where it's come to, that we have such a small but dedicated modern wrestling audience. It's okay. They're good performers, and well, boy, what a great story. You know, let's put them on last.
And to your earlier point, if there were 70,000 tickets sold and there wasn't a pandemic, it would sell out, but you can't really give all that credit to any of the matches. You know, Ronda Rousey was a crossover star. Yes. You know, Suzanne bought her book.
Yeah, and that's another thing I was going to say is the UFC crowds, and for some of the pay-per-views and the big events, yes, UFC as a brand is an audience, but that's the difference between combat sports and modern wrestling now, is that really the show in wrestling is what draws rather than the main event, whereas the main events in the UFC and in boxing and et cetera are still indicative of the drawing power of the specific individual in the main event. It's not just, it's WrestleMania, so we're going to buy it. Who's on it?
That's right.
And that's another problem with wrestling that Vince has mostly created.
He wanted WWF to be the star, not the wrestler.
And interchangeable names and personalities that we give you, and we own your stuff and everything. So it's always going to be the brand and not the star. And that's completely the antithesis of how wrestling and any conflict in any sport was ever built to begin with. But I just, what have we done? What have we done, Brian? What have we done to the wrestling business?
I take no blame for any of this.
Well, I try to tell people for 30 fucking years, they wouldn't listen to me, and now everything I have said has come true. The comedification, the comedyfying of the business, and the exposure of the business, and not only just the exposure of is it a work or not, or is it fake or not, but the actual explanation of everything has, and now here's is what it is. Then I don't see how it can get any. That's a famous quote from Robert Fuller to Jerry Jarrett, or Jerry Jarrett to Robert Fuller, when Jerry said, "Robert, it can't get much worse," and Robert said, "Oh yes, it can." And then he went back to Knoxville. How can wrestling get any less popular? There's only 2 million fucking people watching the biggest show. But yet I'm the one that's crazy because I don't like this stuff when it's never been less popular ever in the history of history. And it's me. Somebody explain that to me. I mean, you know, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, goddamn, so Cornette wants to go back to where, you know, the goddamn heels had to fight their way out of the ring." Yeah, at least we got the feedback. I never thought I'd miss that. or having to fucking police escorts out of the building or whatever, but then you knew you had people. You had interest. You had them hooked. You had the emotion. And now it's just, oh, let's watch it. It's on Peacock. And I just, I never thought. And anybody that's now, you've only, because you're a young whippersnapper, Brian, you've only known me for 25 years or so. But people who have known me for even longer than that, if you'd have told them 30 years ago, Cornette will not only at some point completely quit the wrestling business, but hate the sight of it and only watch it because he gets paid to talk bad about it. They would have been, what the fuck are you talking about? I would have stayed at a wrestling event if I needed emergency surgery or had to go to a family funeral. But I never thought this day would come that I just can't stomach it. Anyway, that's why I'm cranky all the time. But you know what I can stomach? Did you have any closing thoughts about that, by the way?
I think you covered everything. I once again will reiterate, best match on WrestleMania. I'm happy it ended night one. And also, we didn't even point out, it was a big moment for a lot of people. 2 African-American females in the main event, the final match of WrestleMania. It's a pretty historic moment. And they delivered. It was a great match.
Very good. And I'm happy for them. I just don't see anybody hitting the ring with a fucking knife over them.
I'll tell you something. There's a better chance of a crazy fan hitting the ring with a knife in a women's match than a men's match nowadays.
Well, I don't see what the possibility is of it happening, period, because nobody's mad, because they know it's all bullshit. You can't get anybody worked up. If you try to get somebody worked up verbally, they fucking get mad and try to cancel you. And if you fucking have a good enough match that you do get people worked up, then the next match they start doing goddamn alley-oops and fucking cheerleading, and you're reminded that it's all fucking bullshit. It's very dark, Brian, very dark.